Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to this presentation. I'm glad we're going to have a chance to talk about something that quietly changes congregational life for the better: multi-purpose fundraising. The idea is simple: plan activities that raise money and also advance other parts of your synagogue's mission, whether that's learning or connection, service to the community, celebration, whatever it is. What I want to give you today is a clear practical map and some examples so that you can take away ideas that feel doable and joyful. So, when we say multi-purpose, we mean an activity that explicitly raises money and also accomplishes at least one other goal of your synagogue. That could be building intergenerational ties, offering some practical education that is just of good help to your membership, lifting up a member's small business, or deepening interfaith understanding in the community. When this is properly done, multi-purpose fundraising events broaden participation, they increase visibility in your local neighborhood, and they root your fundraising in Jewish values. They also invite people who might not otherwise come to a fundraiser to show up and to become involved. I think that'll become more apparent as we continue through the presentation. So when we say multi-purpose, we mean an activity that explicitly raises funds and also accomplishes at least one other goal of your synagogue. So like I said before, it could be any of the examples you're seeing on this screen. Building intergenerational ties, offering some kind of practical education, like, how to fix your sink on your own without calling a plumber, being offered by a plumber who's a member of your congregation, and any of these other examples that you see. When you combine a fundraising event with one of these other goals, this does a lot of good for your congregation, and it helps break fundraising out of its own silo. It lets you ask for money while also hosting meaningful learning or strengthening relationships between different subgroups of your community that don't always have a lot of contact with each other. It also lets you do things like support members' talents or businesses, and sometimes it lets you connect with neighbors. So, when you're trying to design a multi-purpose fundraising event, ask yourself a few questions. What parts of our mission or our goals will this event fulfill? Who will this event bring into contact with our congregation? How much volunteer and staff time and energy will it require? And how are we going to measure success, both as a fundraiser and in terms of non-fundraising goals? All right, I'm going to now offer a few examples. And honestly, these examples may or may not be the kinds of things that would be right for your congregation. Rather than be overly focused on the content of these examples, I want to invite you to turn on a switch in your brain that's sort of looking for the way that the fundraising component and the other goal component that you're trying to fulfill, those two come together. Some of these examples are going to involve a lot of work and effort. Some of them are going to involve very little work and effort. So let me start with this idea of a teen-led arts night. All right, imagine that your congregation happens to have a good, solid group of post-B'nai Mitzvah teens. It's a good year for that program in your congregation, and they would like to organize a multicultural evening of poetry and music. They decide they want to do this in the fall, and they're hoping they can have their event in May. So the idea is they're going to plan, promote, and run this show with some adult support behind the scenes. Tickets are going to be sliding scale. Proceeds are going to support a team project or some kind of travel that they get to do. So this is a fundraiser for your congregation, even though the funds are going to a specialized purpose. They're not going into your general fund. Teens are going to gain some leadership skills. If they're college bound, this is going to be something they're going to be able to write about and point to in their college applications. Their families are going to get to see them shine. And the congregation's reputation is going to grow a little as a place where creative intergenerational things happen. So imagine that this thing gets started, and the religious school has a little bit of money that they're able to dedicate for a very modest budget, and they're able to pair some youth leads with adult mentors. And just so that we have a little bit of an example of who we would be centering with a project like this, I grabbed a few random pictures. I actually think that in the first quarter of the 21st century, the diversity that you see in these photos is pretty close to what you might find in a lot of our synagogues, which is also its own blessing. I want to move forward to describe a particular way in which this fundraising event might play out. And I'm going to get more specific and be very imaginative, right? So let's take this basic teen poetry event, this multicultural evening of poetry and music. So there are ways that you could make this event even more multi-purpose. It's already multi-purpose if it's just the teens putting it together and then having the event, because it's raising money and it's supporting your teens, which is another one of your goals. But let's imagine that you have a university nearby, if you look in the upper left-hand corner of this slide, called the Parkway University School of Nonprofit Management. And let's also imagine, if we look to the upper right-hand side of the slide, the green area of the slide, that you own your own building, and it includes a stage and a large social hall, and you've got some, maybe not great, but you've got some sound equipment for a concert. Let's also imagine in the lower left-hand corner of the slide that you have a member volunteer who advises students on building their profile for college applications. And let's look to the center bottom of the green area of the slide. You've got another member who is a sound technician. And finally, you've got a member who is a videographer who has told you they will give you a deep discount on their usual price for doing an event. So with all of these elements in hand, imagine that this event ends up expanding a little bit further than just teens organizing a multicultural evening of poetry and music. Imagine that someone reaches out to the Parkway University School of Nonprofit Management, and lo and behold, it turns out that there are graduate students there who need to fulfill their own requirement of doing a community project. These teenagers could end up getting some coaching and support from the grad students. I'm just adding that as another wrinkle because that would fulfill yet another goal, right, of most of our synagogues, which is to build fruitful and meaningful, strong ties with other organizations that do good in the local community. So now you've got your event that's going to be happening in May, and it's doing a bunch of things for you all at once. I'll also just add, if you think about storytelling and the importance of having good stories to tell, especially having good stories with photos to tell for future fundraising communications, this is another thing to be thinking about as you're coming up with ideas for standalone events that may raise, a modest amount of money, but also accomplish great things for your synagogue. You're literally creating the stories that are going to become part of your ask in more traditional fundraising appeals in the future. Okay, so you put together this multicultural evening of poetry and music featuring young artists. The teenagers are doing the outreach to the wider local community. These are not just Jewish young artists. These are artists of all backgrounds from the social orbit of these teenagers. They're given some guidelines about, not cursing while they're on stage in the synagogue and whatnot, which they're all willing to abide by. And you end up with this fabulous evening. And you've set a goal. You're hoping to net $10,000. I just kind of made that number up. Maybe it's far less than that, but you get the picture. Okay. Now I'm going to move to a very different kind of multi-purpose fundraising event. This is something called a professional services auction. So the way that this works is you think about the professional and hobby skills that are there amongst your membership. Who is someone who gives music lessons, guitar lessons, maybe piano lessons? Who is a professional tutor? Who does legal consults, perhaps legal consults in a specific area, like involving wills and estates? Who is a caterer? Who prepares meals? Who knows how to teach people how to bake challah? A professional services auction lets members of your congregation offer their time and talent to the highest bidder. So basically, they're donating. If it's a person who teaches guitar, maybe they're donating 3 free lessons. Right? If it's somebody who teaches how to bake challah, they're donating an afternoon where they're willing to teach challah up to 5 people. If somebody is a landscape, if somebody does landscape services or they own a small company that does it, they're donating, I don't know, a certain amount of service. And then you are setting up an auction that is a fundraiser for your synagogue. And you can do the auction in person, but you can also do this entire auction online. And there are some pretty easy ways to do this, especially with some of the donor and fundraising management software that's available. And if you're not sure about how to acquaint yourself with those kinds of platforms, get in touch with someone in the Thriving Communities Department and we can help you. But basically, you can have an auction run for like 3 weeks. And you can be communicating with your congregants via your e-newsletters and your regular emails and on your social media and from the Bima. And you can have signage up and just be doing a full blitz to be letting people know that they have until such and such a date and time to place their bids for these professional services that they could gain. And you don't have to limit it to members of your synagogues. If there are local businesses that would like to get in on the fun and donate some of their services, that's okay too. But you get this basic idea, right? And you're accomplishing multiple goals here. You are lifting up the skills and talents of some of your members. If you're including businesses in the local community, you are forging ties in your local community and deepening and extending awareness about your synagogue into more corners of the community. You never know who might be Jewish or who might be Jewish adjacent. This is how word of mouth about synagogues spreads. So you're achieving more than one purpose at a time, and you are also raising some money. Maybe not a lot, but you're raising some money. All right, everyone. Let's look at another one of these. So this is something that you could do as a one-time event, or you could do one every season, spring, summer, fall, winter. Taste and learn, food and Jewish learning. So this would be a great way to involve your rabbi, as well as, a different volunteer who loves cooking. for each one of these events. And the idea is you've got somebody who's going to do preparing a certain kind of cuisine that people are going to have a chance to try, and they're going to get to learn from the person who's preparing the food, some stories about this food. If these are family recipes, they're going to learn about some of that. If these are just recipes from a part of the world that maybe folks aren't that familiar with, but the cook is, they're going to learn about that. And the rabbi, or maybe it's just somebody who's knowledgeable and is a good teacher of classical Jewish texts, they're going to prepare a kind of fun and very accessible classical Jewish text study that goes along with the food. And again, you're charging a sliding scale. Maybe you're only pulling in a couple $100 each time, but that's okay. The bottom line is you're actually meeting some of your adult ed or family education goals if children are welcome. You are probably drawing out of the woodwork some people to do the cooking who may not be members who regularly participate. So you're meeting the goal of trying to develop your active membership base, and you are also raising some money. And every little bit helps. So again, the last two examples I shared were lower effort. This one is higher effort. This would be, something that you might need to partner with some local businesses. If you have a chocolatier, if you have wineries, if you have a kind of shishi coffee shop or a place that is known for making terrific lattes and espresso drinks, as well as cocktails. And obviously, you need to gauge your own community in terms of whether or not you want to have alcohol. But the idea is what you're putting together is like a tasting event. And you're getting local businesses to basically sponsor the event by donating their goods, and possibly, if they're willing to do it, having someone who represents them present to also talk about their delectable food items. And then you're pairing that with either some learning or some entertainment. And so this is the kind of evening that you would need to plan a couple months in advance, and you need to make sure you have the right venue space to be able to do it. If you were all set up with your own building and a stage and a sound system, then it's going to be a lot easier. If you need to do it somewhere else, you still might want to do it, even if you're like renting a space, or you might want to explore spaces that might actually be available in your local community for free. Sometimes libraries have really, really good community rooms. I actually know of a couple of supermarkets that have these upstairs community rooms for classes and events. It's worth finding out where you could potentially have access to a venue. Or you might partner with another religious congregation in your community that you have a warm relationship with, or that you want to build a relationship with, and let their members come as well, and split the take from the fundraising. So again, I want to say, one of the things about these fundraising events that are multi-purpose is a lot of them are not designed to be the thing that like fills in a gigantic hole in your budget. But they are designed to break fundraising out of its own separate silo, integrate it with the other goals that you have, and they're especially great opportunities for people to have fun while they are fundraising. And I cannot tell you how important that is. All right, I'm going to go through a few more examples, and now I'm going to kind of give them the speed treatment. So I'm not going to unpack them in detail. All right, next up, I want to mention one that might seem very counterintuitive. But if you've got a lot of sidurim, if you've got a lot of prayer books that kind of are a little the worse for wear, you could actually have a night where a bunch of people, and this could be good for kiddos and teens, where they are being sponsored by donors who are going to contribute, 25 cents for every prayer book that they repair. You might be able to use a prayer book repair night with some home baked snacks, where the young people get to do a mitzvah, the synagogue benefits, and a couple $100 get raised. All right, practical knowledge workshops. So these are pretty straightforward. This is where if you have members who are experts, who maybe do certain things for a living, like they can, maybe there's a veterinarian who is willing to teach people the basics of pet first aid. Maybe there's a writer who can teach people how to start their own blog. But basically what you're doing is you're trying to find out if there's folks like that who would be willing to donate their teaching time one night or one afternoon with a sliding scale donation, and the money goes to the synagogue, right? Multi-purpose, good fundraiser, not a lot of effort. All right. I had to throw in a pet-based fundraiser. If you have a professional photographer in your congregation, or if there's one in the wider community who basically wants to become better known, and they're willing to donate their services, maybe just only charge for the materials, for any prints they might make of photos. You can totally have fun. You can do a pet photo shoot. You might want to do it outdoors. You definitely want to call your insurance company and make sure your liability stuff will cover you in the case of a mishap involving a pet. But this would be a very memorable fundraiser, and talk about ending up with photos that you can use for future fundraising asks. You can't beat people with their pets. All right. Got 4 more ideas to share with you. Let's say that your congregation is in a big city with major league teams, or is in a college town, or maybe is in a city with minor league teams. It might even be easier to do in a smaller city. The idea is, what you want to do is get in touch with whoever the publicity staff person is for one of these teams, and you tell them that you're a local synagogue, and that what you'd like to do is have an event where a few players from the team come out, and their job is going to be to talk to your students, your religious school students and teens and their families, and just to talk to them about how they practice, what drives them, how do they discipline themselves to work so hard. And if you've got a rabbi, you could have the rabbi come out and offer like a 1 or 2 line classical Jewish teaching that sort of echoes the work ethic or the commitment that these athletes show. And then, if it's a team that is not a giant major league team where tickets are expensive, but rather a team that kind of wants more fans, then, if the team is willing to offer distributing free tickets to an upcoming game, now you've really got a terrific multi-purpose fundraising event, and you've built connections with the wider community, and you've got photos and stories you're going to be able to use for future fundraising asks. All right. This one's pretty straightforward. Let's say you swing into spring, and we've got Passover, and Christian folks have Easter, and maybe this is one of those years when Ramadan falls in the spring or early summer. So you combine forces with a local church and a local mosque, and you hold a joint fundraiser, and you've got clergy at on a panel, each talking about their respective holidays, and then doing sort of like a mutual appreciation kind of thing. And it's sliding scale, and either the funds go to support all three congregations, or the three congregations pick an outside charity. And it's still a fundraiser. You're doing a fundraiser even if you're raising money and giving it to somebody else. That is okay. And again, you're thinking about all of the different ways that these events turn into wins for your congregation. All right. Kind of similar to the previous idea, let's say that you've got a presentation and you're talking with some experts who are interested in offering a mini course on caring for aging parents, right? And maybe they're from a local social work nonprofit that is really good at this. And you're thinking, if we do this event, we might, get 8 or 9 people. But if we partnered up with 2 or 3 other congregations, we could end up with 40 or 50 people. And perhaps we could turn this into a fundraiser as well. We could have a sliding scale. And again, either it's to support the adult ed offerings of the congregations that are there, or maybe it's to support the nonprofit that's doing the presenting. The basic idea is if there's something that is a need in your community that really touches the lives of people across faith traditions, look into the possibility of teaming up with other congregations and turning it into a multi-faith event. Similarly, if you have a rabbi who is best friends with a local pastor and they have appeared together and they are a fantastic duo and they're both great teachers, then maybe y'all should talk to them about co-teaching a class. Maybe it's about looking at rabbinic midrash and some of the New Testament parables and having a dual faith course exploring connections and differences between these two types of literature. This all depends on your local circumstances and what is doable and is positive that you could do. But this is the kind of thing where you could end up getting a lot of people to sign up for like a multi-part course. And you could have a sliding scale and say that it's a fundraiser that's going to be split by both congregations, and you might do quite well. All right. Now that I have zipped through all of these ideas, I've touched on this a little bit, but you're going to be wanting to capture stories that emerge from any of these multi-purpose fundraising events. You're also going to want to be taking photos and taking time to secure verbal permission from anyone who appears in any of your photos, and then getting that permission noted in writing. But you want to include these photos in a photo bank. You want to capture some version of these stories. Make sure you get consent from people who are featured in them, and then put them in your story bank. And then you're going to want to use them later when you're doing other kinds of fundraising. And you can consult the Fundraising Guide's chapter on storytelling for good information about how to work with those. Final slide. So if you look in the guide to fundraising, if you look in the chapter on multi-purpose fundraising, there is a planning worksheet that you can use, and it will help you plan a multi-purpose fundraising event. I highly recommend it. And, this worksheet will help you pick a type of event, assign your lead or leads, set the budget for the event if it requires spending a little money, list partners. It allows you to start small and then consider, how labor intensive you want the event to be, which segments of your congregation's population you want to involve, or which ones you want to create connections between. So you have a variety of different options here. And I just want to call attention to the guide as a resource you can turn to. The chapter on multi-purpose fundraising has the information contained in these slides, as well as a link to the planning worksheet. So that's it for me. Thank you so much, and hope that you enjoyed this presentation.